From the time you leave your place of work until you get home, you are under constant surveillance. And it's not from the people who you may think. When you leave the club late at night, you go grocery shopping, or you just go visit a friend, all your actions are being monitored. I'm not talking about GPS tracking in your phone or your vehicle being tracked if you have those capabilities in your vehicle. No, I'm talking about something completely different that you might not be aware of and is oftentimes right in front of your face. Before I say how you're being monitored, I'm going to come clean here. I actually don't think it's a bad thing. I'm all for it. It's helped police solve investigations days, weeks, months after the offense has occurred. I'm going to walk you through a scenario, a very common scenario, and explain how it is that you're being monitored. Okay, it's the middle of the day. You're going to go shopping. So you leave your house, you get in your car, you drive down a few streets, you stop at intersections. Maybe you want to grab a coffee on the way or on the way back or something to eat. So you stop. Doesn't matter. You go into the store, you go through drive-through. Makes no difference. Then you go to the department store. You do some shopping for a little bit. You get back into your car and you're going to drive home. But let's say you take a completely different route going home. That also doesn't matter, okay? You are being monitored from the moment that you left your house until you get back in. There's nothing uncommon about that scenario, and there's nothing suspicious about it. There's no red flags raised. You're doing exactly what you do have the right to do in a free society, and there's nothing wrong with that. If something was to happen along the way, I'm going to get into this, your actions could be investigated hours, days, even weeks later. I'm going to get into this a little more, but before I continue, I gave an example as if you're driving a car, but it's the same thing if you're walking or riding a bike. What else is interesting is the way that you're being monitored, their surveillance, is becoming more and more sophisticated, if I can use that word. And again, I'm not even entirely opposed to it. We know that this has taken place. In fact, some people, it gives them a sense of comfort and maybe a sense of security, false security, knowing that they are being monitored in case something bad happens. This video is about being monitored when you're on the roads or sidewalks, when you're commuting. But we know by now, or you should know by now, that as soon as you enter some of these grocery stores or big box department stores or even a mall, you're also under surveillance all the time. I've attended numerous calls where there was an offense committed and security, we had to speak with security, who after the fact were able to provide us with a recording of the offense taking place in an aisle. They're able to zoom in. We get the suspect information. And quite often, we've had to go back and speak with security weeks after the fact, and they were able to get that information and provide that information. We're being monitored. We know that by now. And the quality these days is just phenomenal. I mentioned earlier that surveillance has become more sophisticated. It wasn't uncommon years ago. We'd go and try to gather some video evidence of an offense that took place, and we'd be handed some VHS tape that's been recorded over 150, 250 times. It was dark. It was fuzzy. And nowadays with digital 4K, even 6K resolution, they can simply provide that information to police immediately. There's nothing to download. There's nothing to seize. It's fantastic. It's quick and it's easy. You ever see these things when you're driving on the highway? Big, tall poles. They look like a light pole, but there's something at the top. It's round. You have your suspicions, maybe it's a camera, but you don't know what it is. You see them in every major city, and you see them on the outskirts as well. They're everywhere, every few hundred feet. When you pass one, as you're driving, take a look, because you'll see another one coming up. And as you pass that one, you'll see another one coming up in the distance. They record everything that's taken place on the highway, but also you'll see them on the on-ramps or the off-ramps. They record everything that's taken place. And listen, I've seen the footage. It is fantastic quality. It's good stuff. I've been to some of the offices where some of these things are monitored, where there's large walls full of screens. It's kind of like something you see at a movie. It's very, very impressive. The footage is all recorded and can be provided at a later date. They can be viewed at a later date. I've seen some of the footage of these cameras. And again, this is after the fact, after a major accident or collision, I should say. They were able to go back, zoom in on what took place, and also be able to identify the driver, the passengers. If they got out of the vehicle, they could give an accurate clothing description. They could even read small letters which were written on top of a baseball hat. And this is after the fact. It's very, very impressive. A lot of people don't realize how many cameras there are, but listen, don't take my word for it. Next time you're out and about, just watch. You'll see what I mean. But where else is there cameras? That covers the major highways, the roadways, on-ramps, off-ramps. How about some of the plazas and stores? Driving up and down some of these busy streets when you get off the highway. Every plaza has video surveillance. Besides the plaza having their own surveillance, the individual stores inside the plaza also have surveillance and are recording everything that's taken place. But sometimes those cameras are pointing towards the street. So they'll get the front of the plaza, the front door, and they'll point towards the street. So now you're getting surveillance from the plaza, but the individual stores, if there's cameras pointing towards the street, once you get off the highway, you're able to be picked up by these cameras at located in some of the different stores and different plazas all the way down the street. Okay, easy. That makes sense. But where else is there cameras? How about people's homes? Drive around any populated area, any subdivision these days, and you see the cameras posted at the front of people's homes, pointed towards their driveway, pointed towards the road, and they monitor everything. And again, there's been some terrible quality in the past, but I've seen surveillance that people have in their own homes, which are crystal clear. They pick up everything crystal clear, whether it's a daytime or in the dead of night at 2 a.m. And there's also databases where community members can sign up and where they basically let the police know that if something takes place in their area, they have video surveillance and they are willing to provide that surveillance to the police if something should ever happen. There's databases. All right, these things exist. We know this. Maybe not to the extent that I just explained, but there's no stopping this machine from happening. But let me go through another scenario with you. And it's not an uncommon scenario, sadly. You're out with your friends, you decide to go into the city, to a nightclub, and you leave. It's 2 a.m. and there's a shooting, a drive-by. Heaven forbid. I wish it didn't happen, but it happens all the time. The vehicle leaves in a hurry, last seen going eastbound on Main Street, and makes a left to go northbound on Yonge Street. With everything that I just stated, the fact that there's video surveillance everywhere, the storefronts, the plazas, and that has nothing to do with some of the police surveillance that we all know is at different intersections throughout the city. The vehicle's traveling northbound on Yonge Street, lots of plazas. They decide to get onto the highway. There's video surveillance on the highway. They know where the vehicle got on the highway. If they're driving down the highway, they could drive for 10 kilometers. They know exactly where they are because as soon as they pass one of the cameras, the next one picks up. They can see where they got off the highway. If they stop at an intersection, there's gas stations, there's additional plazas. If they decide to get off at a side street, it doesn't take police long. Again, check it out for yourself. You walk down the side street, you can see all the different cameras. You know who's recording what. You talk to the homeowners. Maybe they'll cooperate, maybe they won't. They provide you with the details. Quite often, and this has happened, they can follow that suspect vehicle right to their home, right to their apartment, right to their buddy's apartment, but they know where that person is, where they lived, and they can backtrack from there like you wouldn't believe. Here's another one. Somebody decides to hold up a convenience store or a gas station. Going back to what I just said, besides the video surveillance where the incident occurred, they get into a vehicle and they're going to get onto the highway, let's say. It's not all that uncommon. They figure, I'm going to rob the place, get on a highway, take off, and I'm good to go. Well, besides the fact that the storefronts and the plazas can capture them going to the highway, and then you have the surveillance on the on-ramp, they're picked up along the highway. At some point, they get off the highway. Let's say they decide to rob a place in the west end of the city because they live in the east end and they might get recognized in the east end, so they decide to rob a place in the west end. So they drive back to the east end. Now they got to get off the highway. They're being monitored as they get off the highway. Now they're in a car. Maybe it's a stolen car. Maybe it's their car, but maybe it's a stolen car. They better ditch a car in a parking lot, in a plaza. Well, guess what? The storefronts, even if the plaza doesn't have surveillance, the storefronts may have video surveillance. So they ditch a car somewhere. And now they're walking across the street to go to their house, to their street, or to their building. The building most likely has video surveillance. So they're going to be seen walking into the building. There's that continuity from the beginning, from the incident till the very end. And now there's a whole other thing about what police do to, establish identity and all that. But that's not what this video is about. I'm not talking about something that may happen 5-10 years from now if we're not too careful with surveillance. I'm talking about things that happen now. These scenarios I'm giving you are very, very real, and the capabilities exist and are used to solve crimes now, which is a good thing. That doesn't scare me. What does concern me, though, because we've heard the horror stories, would be a government institution, including the police, of gathering your information without your knowledge, even if you've done nothing wrong and you're not under investigation. So what I mean by that is if you have a video camera facing the front of your house or the rear, or you have a doorbell camera which monitors and records everything, however, that data is stored somewhere else, not with the user, it would concern me that some of these institutions would gather that information without your knowledge at all, without going through the proper channels, without a warrant. It would be them just having instant access to all that information. Because we all know that some of the technology, some of the devices we may have, and not just our phones, but some of the devices we may have throughout our house are listening all the time, waiting for an order, waiting for an instruction. Do you hear that, Siri? Alexa? I was just kidding. I love you. That's a topic for a whole other video. And it can be scary. I'm not being dramatic here. It can actually genuinely be scary. There's a big difference between our devices, which we carry on us at all times, including our vehicles, and being under surveillance, constant surveillance from the moment that we leave our homes and we travel. Might sound odd, but there's a difference. Listen, folks, I would love your feedback. I know that some people may agree with my views on this, and you may disagree. Please let me know. I read every comment when it's appropriate. I do respond, and I would just love to know your thoughts on this. And until the next video, be safe out there, look after one another, and perhaps we will see you again.